Hey, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, hope you're having an amazing day. You have a beautiful smile. See what happens when you subscribe. You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. On this episode, we talked to the one and only Jacqui Pruet. She has a really cool background being a regulator in Texas, and she has a lot of cool frameworks on how to really think about how we can drive our programs forward. For our next 10 years to look different than our last 10 years, it's going to take us showing up in a different way. We have to bring a fresh eyes. We have to bring beginners' eyes to what we're doing and really see the extent to which our system is generating the outcomes that we want. And if it's not, we got to re-look at that system and see what kind of changes we can make. So this is a phenomenal episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Jacqui.
Howdy.
What's happening?
So glad to be with you today. Let's see.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts. How's it going today?
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, let's dive right in. I always like to start with like your background. What were you like as a kid? What was it like growing up? And how did that propel you into this industry that we all kind of find ourselves in?
Oh man, I was a neurodivergent kid. I'm a neurodivergent adult, so I was a neurodivergent kid. I came from, frankly, a broken home. I moved. I lived in 18 different places by the time I was 18 because my parents were divorced. And because of that, I learned how to adapt and deal with different environments very quickly. And because of the way my brain works, I learned how to see different systems and how to adjust myself within those different environments really quickly. And I think that really helps lend itself to large organizations, seeing how patterns work, seeing how to help organizations adapt very quickly to changing environments and really meet shifting dynamics, shifting needs, and different cultures.
I knew there was something I like about you. You know, I went to 10 different schools before I went to high school.
Okay.
It was never easy being the new kid. I kind of always hated being the new kid and always standing in front of the class and saying, "Hi, I'm Nick. Great to meet you all." But looking back, I just feel like that really built a lot of, characteristics that I've been able to like leverage. And some of those things you talked about kind of resonated with me, being able to kind of see the lay of the land quickly, being able to like fit in quickly. And did you see some of those things? Like how did those experiences really help you kind of specifically in your career?
For me, it created actually a lot of empathy. You learn, if you want to have, to your point, if you want to have friends, you learn how to meet people where they are versus where your comfort is. You learn how to meet people where their needs are. You learn how to listen really well. You learn how to adapt. You learn how to hear who people are. And it's not about where your comfort is. It's, well, what is this? Who are you? What's happening here? And I guess we share that dynamic a little bit. And that's a lot about what ethics and compliance is. It's a lot of active listening. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot today, I imagine, because it's something I'm very, very passionate about. And I think really underpins what ethics and compliance is about.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, it's kind of like coming from a position of weakness in a way. You have to kind of find your way in. And, I really never put this together literally until just now, but in many cases, our industry or our compliance departments feel like that's sort of an outsider. And I think some of the things you're talking about can help us not be apart from the business, but really be a part of the business and really integrate into it, which is like, that's how we end up actually adding value. You know what I'm saying? So many times, many of us, or so many of the conversations I have, that same old sort of story is sort of repeated over and over again from all these different folks where I just have a check the box function and I have I don't have the endorsement I need, or, I'm brought in after the fact and I'm kind of in reactionary mode all the time. And I think when we can sort of employ some of these things that we're talking about, these kinds of characteristics or these kinds of skills, we can really find our way in and find opportunities to add more value and move from that bumper sticker to really be kind of a part of the engine, the engine of the car. and I'm so tired of us thinking of ourselves in this industry as cost centers. I think it's a very limiting belief, and I think it ends up kind of creating this like prison that many of us find ourselves in. But like that's a prison of our own making. Like compliance adds value to an organization by professionalizing it and de-risking it and adding more business excellence to it. But it takes us kind of showing up in a different way, like you were just saying.
1,000,000%. And I think you're hitting on a core of where my background and your background, I guess, this is where we're parallel. And in my belief system, I talk about this regularly. We are the relationship department. And kind of where my background is I move from place to place, and it's about learning how to develop relationships very quickly. And really where my neurodivergence, my background, and having to move a lot, I really do see that that's what ethics and compliance is. We are not the police. We are the relationship department. And I've gone to all these different conferences now. I've done a lot of networking. I've built my own networking group. I've done a lot of my own networking through LinkedIn globally. And what I hear over and over and over is we don't have funding. We don't have support. We are this island, this little silo, and no one likes us. And I'm like, I'm one of the most popular people in my organization and any organization I go to. And I never am seen as the police. I'm seen as this person that people could come to. And I think that that's what ethics and compliance really needs to be. We're the hotline. Well, how do we get people to come and talk to us if they don't like us?
Yeah, exactly.
If they don't trust us.
Exactly. So just curious, you moving around so much, were you in the carnival too?
No.
I'm just kidding.
No.
So you're moving around a bunch, and then what was next? What was the next sort of lily pad that you sort of bounced off of before winding up in this, ethics and compliance space?
I always like to say, and you know what, I don't think I'm unique in this. I don't think anyone grew up saying, I'm going to be in ethics and compliance when I grow up. It's not like anyone even knew this was a career probably when we were growing up. I'm Jacqui of all trades is what I'd like to call myself. I've had a non-traditional path to get here. I came up through some tough, I know I don't look like it, but I've come up and through some tough lines of work. I was in banking. I did mergers and acquisitions, assimilations. Banking is a really cool line of work. I know not many people say that. I felt that way. And what I mean by that is it will take people with a different background and it will give you a chance to work your way up within it. I was a theater major, poli-sci double major. I needed a job when I was out of school. They gave me a chance. I came in on as a personal banker and a teller. I worked my way up to becoming an assistant vice president. I was working with regional banks, and what those are for is their investment vehicles. The way they really make their money is by consolidating them, packaging them, and reselling them through mergers and acquisitions. And they saw the potential in me. They gave me a chance, and boom, all of a sudden for 11 years, I was effectively doing mergers and acquisitions assimilations. And so what
was that like? How did you get into the M&A game, and tell me a little bit more about this like assimilations piece of it and what you kind of gathered from that,
I was managing teams for the regional bank. They saw how good I was. I mean, this is going to sound like a weird skill set, but they saw, that I was really good at bringing people up within the company. But even when I had to let them go, they saw the grace with which I could let people go, which sounds like a weird skill set.
Yeah. But, it's like, it's like somebody who loves their executioner or something.
I have
charming executioner. You know what I mean?
I this is a weird skill set, but I am actually still in touch with 2 people I've let go. I don't like letting people go, but you have to do it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've been given hugs when I've let people go, because when you do it the right way, I think that does matter. It's a weird thing for us to be talking about. I didn't know we'd be talking about that today, but here we are. They saw the way that I could handle that. I had large teams under me. They needed someone who could help, because when a regional bank is doing M&A, they're usually doing it very, very fast. You're talking about 2 to 3 months. Wow. That's heavily E&C work. It's a lot of policy. They brought me in to look at the 4 Ps, the policy, the procedure, the product, and yes, the people. And so they would parachute me in. I would be doing this on the run. They needed someone who understood these things very quickly. I would roll them up to the holding company and board. They would make their final determinations. And then it was my job to go in with grace and help these people who were usually terrified on both sides.
Totally. Yeah.
Because we're looking at it on both sides. Who is best at doing this? And sometimes there were redundancies. And we would be bringing these 2 companies together. And the goal is to help people. And my way of looking at it was, how do I help these people achieve? How do I help some of these people at some of these banks? They've been with the same company for one woman 30 years. She
Wow.
didn't apply for a new job. She was excellent at what she did, but she was angry and terrified and scared. And my job was to help her say, no, you're amazing. How do you handle this transition you didn't ask for? Right.
Right.
And so that was the beginning of my behavior modification and change management skill set. And you kind of learn it baptism by fire. You're not, there's no class you take for that.
Yeah. You learn to ride the bike by falling off it, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. But I looked at it as, these people are amazing. These people are hardworking. They deserve a chance to do well. They deserve a chance to succeed. They deserve to be cared for. And they could have someone coming in there with a hatchet, or they could have someone coming in there with care. Right. And so I came in with care, and that's always been my philosophy. And that's how I've always approached all of these things. And so
and how do you think that approach, like, why is that approach better, and how did that create more value?
Well, because again, this woman did have value. You could go in there and terrify her, and you could lose this woman who has these relationships, who has this institutional knowledge, who has this capacity, and you can never get that asset back.
Yeah, right.
Or you could treat her with what she deserves: dignity, respect, and value. Keep that asset, keep those relationships, keep that value for your organization. And there's so much research that backs this up, by the way, because I am a nerd. I believe in creating value. I believe in creating respect, and I believe in really saving your company, also ultimately money. And I see the Venn diagram, because again, the way my brain works is, where's that Venn diagram? Because life is about looking for the Venn diagram. Where is that overlap? Where can you create those values? Where can you create dignity? Where can you create respect? And where can you create value all at the same time?
Yeah, yeah.
And usually those things do overlap. There's a lot of research that all validates this. It's a lot more expensive for a company to try to bring in a new person, train them, hire them, go through this huge investment than it is to keep that woman with that 30-year legacy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much in what you just said, you know? And when you are doing this sort of assimilation of a acquisition, you see sort of the worst in people in a way, right? Like, everybody is in their backup style. They're all these sort of caged animals because there's all this uncertainty. People don't like change, and being able to bring those folks together. I mean, every business is a people business at this point. So us being able to tune into those things as we're pushing change and getting the buy-in that is necessary for whatever the project is, whether it's on the M&A side or whether it's on the ethics and compliance side, is kind of critical for any of these projects to be, you know, as successful as they could be. So you were doing the banking thing. What was the next move after that?
So, I mean, listen, I loved helping people. I loved doing that, but I'm also a human being. You can only do these things for so long. I was in banking for about 11 years and I got burnt out. Like, you know, it was time for a change. I got out of banking. I wanted something. The other thing was, I was a young mother at that point. I had 2 very small children at home, and I had to travel quite a bit to do that. I was traveling all over the state, and I had children because I wanted children. I had an 8-month-old at home at this point, and I wanted to spend time with her. And I wanted something a little bit more stable where I wasn't traveling quite as much. And this opportunity with the state came available. And if I'm being really honest, I didn't realize I was going to be working with the elite police forces of Texas because it said DPS. I thought I was working with, because in Texas, DPS is also what does the the driver's license is here. So my mind is like, oh, that'll be an easy one. I'll be at the state headquarters and I'll be helping like the leadership of the people who issue driver's licenses. And I showed up for my board, which is what they call interviews. And there was a ranger in my interview. I was like, what's
Oh my
going on
gosh.
here?
Yeah. Am I double parked? What's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a sea of panda mobiles, as I call them, the black and white cars, the panda cars. It's like, huh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And it turned out, no, they were interviewing me to do the leadership and professional development program to develop that for the elite police forces of Texas and those who supported them. And so that's what I got to do. And it was God, that was so much fun. I loved that role. I was developing the programs for how to promote and how to be a leader within the elite police forces of Texas, as well as the state crime lab. And that was just so phenomenal. Like my very first leadership training group that I got to do was for a team for the criminal investigation division. And it was like a deep undercover unit that was having trouble with communication with one another. And so the handlers who were still working on the regular side were struggling with the guys who are on the deep undercover side, and they were just not communicating. And I was teaching them a class about attitude and communication. And again, I guess I just like baptism by fire is what I'm trying to say to you.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Yeah, that was my role. I did that for several years. And then from there, I got stolen to become the chief regulator for the state of Texas, overseeing the entire body of law enforcement, writing laws for the state of Texas on the topic of law enforcement licensure at TCOL, Texas Commission on Law Enforcement.
So when you think about your perspective on what role an ethics and compliance department can have in an organization, that perspective is influenced, of course, by the things that you read, the things you come in contact with, and the experiences that you've had. What have you added to the toolbox from that learning and development experience that you had? Is it communication? Is it just leadership? Is it like, what are, like, again, these the things that you're talking about, change management, leading with empathy, development of people. These are all kind of big rocks in the jar that I think, my analogy is kind of breaking down, but like, these are like major kind of components, you know what I'm saying? But so how did that kind of influence your philosophy, and how did that influence, your perspective on what a compliance department or person should be in an organization?
I mean, so much. When you're working with, so to be clear, the people who had to take my courses were the people that were at the top of their game within the elite police forces of Texas. These are the people who are protecting the governor, who are running the actual state level of police enforcement for the state of Texas. And so if you've ever heard of the Texas Rangers, those were my students, but it wasn't just the Rangers, it was the leadership of the Rangers who were my students. And because they have state mandated requirements for continuing their education. And so for the non-police enforcement side, when it came to their leadership accreditation, that was my area. And the things that I was teaching them were things like active listening, creative problem solving, things like that. And you can't have a lieutenant in the Rangers coming into your class and teaching them rudimentary stuff. They would eat you alive.
Totally.
And you have to have the research to back it up, or again, they will eat you alive. And you have to have a spine made out of iron, because you cannot be
These are Rangers we're talking about here. You know what I mean? So do you feel like that experience gave you a different level of like executive presence? Was that
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm still friends with a lot of them to this day. I like to say I have the best network of brothers and sisters a girl could ask for. I adore them all. I have great relationships with many of them. If you follow me on LinkedIn, every now and then you'll see one of them pop up as a comment supporting me, and I adore that. But I earned it.
Yeah.
And
They don't
they
suffer
make sure
fools
you
well.
earn it.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you touched on there is something important that we all should be, recognizing that, I don't know, like whatever you're teaching needs to be kind of interesting. If you're gonna, everyone's seen it all before, everyone's heard it all before. So we have to have some kind of a way to pierce that veil of attention and resonate with them. Whether, regardless of whatever initiative that we're doing, there's a novelty, or there's, an interest level that we have to convey.
Well, it was more than novelty. I pushed them. And I think that's what they appreciate the most. Like, for instance, they would assume before they came into my class, they knew what they were going to get from me. And the reality is they didn't. And that was, I built almost a cult following for my courses. It went from something they had to take to something that they looked forward to taking. And from there, it went forward to, oh my God, you have to take her courses. And even though they were required to have some of these courses, it went to something that they were telling fellow leadership, you need to get into her class. And so I remember, I will never forget this. I mean, some of the things I had to do, I couldn't change because they were TCOL mandated courses. So like things like the name of the course were dictated by TCOL, and I couldn't adjust that. Like, so for instance, one of the names was Attitude, It's Positively Yours, which to this day, I'm like, oh.
It's like, yeah.
Oh,
great,
come on, I'm teaching Rangers. Give me a break here. But I did have say over the research that backed up what was in there. And if you think it's easy to get Rangers to take a course named something like that, I will argue that is not. But I had wait lists for that class by the time I was done. So
when you were a regulator, and I want to talk a little bit about, I think you had some really good insights. We were at that AI conference together. Your panel was really interesting, and I think you had a lot of interesting things to say from a regulator's perspective. So I'd like to spend a little time talking about that regulator experience and like what you learned from it, and again, what our listeners could maybe gather from it, to kind of inform their own perspective, because everyone's like worried about the regulators coming and knocking on the door and all that kind of stuff. So what was that experience like, and what did you really? What were like the most valuable lessons or stories from that?
Well, what I would say is regulators only come knocking if you're not being preventative yourself. And that's what I love about shifting from being a regulator to being on our side now, is if you're really smart, the regulators only show up if we're being dumb.
Right.
And I mean that, like,
which is very freeing, by the way. It's we should not be in a position of fear. I don't think. I don't think fear is a good sort of sustainable fuel for the effectiveness that is necessary for a compliance program.
I would agree with that. I mean, that was something that I was talking about in my panel, was especially with the current SEC, the way that they're positioned, because that was what it was about, was the SEC's AI regulation. They've actually become very, very friendly if you're paying attention. They've created these amazing roundtables. They're being very open. And if we are very smart, we should be showing up to these roundtables. They are saying, we're listening. So this means we can show up and talk. We could help them. They're giving us a really great chance to show up and help dictate where this could go. And this is our chance to really help design where we want these things to go. And if we're really proactive, we are in a unique position at this moment to help drive where we would like to see AI policy be, and ideally not have a lot of AI policy if we are smart and proactive on our side, showing what we're doing on our side as E&C professionals. If we could say that, well, this is the policy we've built, these are the guardrails we're putting in place, this is what we are proactively doing as E&C professionals, then they don't regulate us, because they're like, okay, and I actually wrote an article about this where we're talking about what they're asking for us as E&C professionals, as regulators currently from the DOJ. Show us. They're actually being really kind of cool, in my opinion. And I feel like,
well, it's kind of the opposite of what everybody acts like they are.
Yes. You know? I feel, if I'm being really blunt, I feel like we're kind of being silly about this in a lot of ways.
I agree.
I think if we show them what we're doing, and if we're smart about it, they will leave us alone. And instead, I feel like industry has been kind of, if I'm being blunt, dumb. We're like, well, let's see what we could get away with. And the dumber we are, the more that they will regulate. And this was said on a different panel. I forget who it was, but there was a great panel full of regulators at the Opal AI conference that we were both at. And they were like, well, regulation happens when industry does something dumb.
Exactly. It's it's reactionary.
Yes. 1,000,000%. That has always been my position as a former regulator. Regulators regulate when industry does something dumb. And right now we're hearing a lot from industry. Well, they're not regulating us, so we could do whatever we want. I'm like, oh my God, no, please, no. And this goes back to E&C should be the relationship department. We shouldn't be the department of no. We shouldn't be the department of, hey, don't do that. We should be like, okay, guys, we are the responsible adults. We make good decisions. What I actually tell my children every day when I send them out into the world, because now they're a little bit older, they're not 8 months old anymore, is make good choices, live with your consequences gracefully, have a great day. And that's kind of what I feel like our job is as E&C. It's not saying, no, don't do that. It's like, hey, guys, we're grown-ups. Let's make some good choices.
So on that front, like how important is just a simple good faith effort then?
Oh, it goes so
that's just that. It's like, that's really all we're solving for. Because I'm asking that, maybe I asked that in a stupid way, but in Hui Chen has this really cool, I'm going to botch this, of course, but she has this quote that I saw recently that it was something like, everybody's in a freaking panic when, a regulator sneezes. And it's like, can you just like take it down a notch and just, we all have brains, we all have common sense. I kind of believe that our best defense against, regulators, the spooky, scary, regulators is just like a good faith effort to extinguish risk. That's kind of it.
Like we were, you had me on a wonderful panel with Matt Kelly and we were talking about third party risk. And there was this question, it was like, well, should we have blanket, I forget what it was, but someone asked in the chat, they asked us about, well, shouldn't we just have like blanket, God, what was it?
Should like rules or something?
Yes. I was like, never, you should never have blanket, It was some kind of contract. They were asking, shouldn't we have blanket third-party risk contracts that always ask for everything?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And my response is absolutely not. That is terrible. And you're going to have bad relationships with everyone. And that kills your E&C department's forward movement. You should have reasonable relationships.
Right. Well, I mean, think about like a woodworker. Like do you know anybody who's like a woodworker? Like if you go into their wood shop, they got 1,000 freaking tools and they have a different, I'm not a woodworker obviously, but like they have different chisel sizes and different sharpness and different hand tools to plane a board, or, they have different grits of sandpaper or whatever. You can't just have one thing if you're going to be an expert in something, or you're going to be an artisan, let's say. So we need to, again, bring that sort of common sense to it. And I just think it's such a cop-out there, fine, here, I'm saying it. I think it's such a cop-out to bring these, I think it's like a really low-level way to kind of do business, to just, a no is easy. Saying no to everything, that's very easy. And that creates this sort of illusion of security. It creates this illusion of like, well, I've de-risked everything because I just kind of say no to everything. I have one sort of like ironclad, in this example, one ironclad, third-party, contract or set of requirements. It's a total cop-out. Like, we need to show up, if in fact the next 10 years in E&C can look different than the last 10 years, which I really believe it can, it's going to take us showing up in a different way. And we need to show up as business people. We need to show up as problem solvers, and we need to bring that sort of common sense lens to whatever the particular circumstance or whatever the specific puzzle that we're trying to solve is.
Well, I think back to the conference you and I were just recently at together, AI is about to change everything. I think that it already is But B, I think the biggest problem that they're waiting to solve is, frankly, the only thing that's holding it back is the power grid, right? Once they figure out how to...
Yeah, that's the new constraint, which is wild in a way.
I know. I mean, I've been talking to all these different AI experts. The real thing that's holding AI back is the power grid. Once they solve that problem, which not to get too high level here because it's not what we're here to talk about. It's an MP3 problem. Once they figure out how to solve the power issue, it'll be the genie's going to be out of the bottle, but it's going to change the conversation you and I are having, and it's going to change how E&C is done. A lot of these processes that are heavy manual processes are going to be automated. And
so then what's our value in that world?
Correct. And that's where I'm going with this is it's really no longer going to be heavily human audits. It's no longer going to be a heavily human process. And it's going to be more about the strategy piece that I keep talking about. It's now going to be more about how are you moving your human component? Because in my article that I wrote, which actually I wrote that article prior to the DOJ update. That's what I'm
Is this the Corporate Compliance Insights article?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a bit, because I was like, oh wow, she must have a freaking, crystal ball or something.
Yeah.
So give us a summary of the article and we can talk about this intersection, because I think this is probably the biggest existential threat to our industry right now.
Yeah.
And I think it translates and is rooted down in our mindset as practitioners in this space in how we're going to navigate through this. I think if we have the wrong mindset and we're, as Hui says, we're jumping and we're in a panic every time there's a sneeze. Well, that's a very low level. That's a very sort of base kind of compliance, approach to building a culture of integrity. So let's dive into that article a little bit, because I think it has a lot of intersections with really everything we're talking about.
Oh, thank you very much. I love that article. I was so thrilled when Sarah and her team at Corporate Compliance Insights chose to publish it. So right when those DOJ, when they updated their guidance, first of all, I always like to point out, everyone talks about the DOJ guidance as if it was guidance for compliance programs. It was not. Let's be very clear. That guidance was for their prosecutors. And then we, as an industry, get to
interpret that.
Yes. And then say, okay, well, this is what we get to do to make sure we are not investigated. Right. But I always like to point out that's actually guidance for their prosecutors. And we always misinterpret that.
Right.
When we talk about it. But I wrote it prior to the guidance coming out. I wrote it for their 2003 guidelines because everyone kept saying, well, we don't understand it. I was like, I don't know. I get it. It makes a lot of sense to me because I'm a former regulator. So I understood the 2003 ones. And what I tried to do when I wrote the article for Sarah and her team was explain how you can action it. And then what's funny is I submitted it to the team. They had it in the editorial process, figuring out when they were going to publish it. And in between me submitting it, while they were editing it, the DOJ guidance dropped their 2004 guidelines. And I was like, oh. And I only had to adjust, I think it was like 3/10thing in the link to the new guidelines versus the old guidelines. And, but I correctly anticipated all the updates.
Yeah. So let's talk through some of those updates and let's talk about that lens that, I mean, you acquired this lens, maybe from your common sense, maybe you were born with it, but it was probably partially at least influenced by your time as a regulator. So what did you see in that guidance, and what was it from that experience as a regulator that allowed you to kind of see around the curve and provide some sort of commentary on some forthcoming guidance that you presumably didn't even know was coming?
I had no clue. I had no clue the update was coming. That was a shock to me, just like everyone else. But what I could read in the 2003 and what I correctly anticipated with the 2004 was it's a three-prong approach. What I still advise and what I say that they are saying is they're asking for a three-prong approach. They're saying that you need, and everyone seems to have the first piece, which is the legal aspect, the investigation aspect. Okay, we know we need to look into problems as they arise. We need to investigate them and we need to address them. That's the legal area, the investigations area, right? And everyone seems to have that one down. The second prong, and so I call that your pogo stick, right? Then I say a second prong, so now you're on stilts, right? Versus just a pogo stick.
Pogo stilts, yeah.
So from a pogo stick to stilts is your data analytics. So now so you have your investigations, maybe you have a hotline. Now you go to looking at the data that you're getting from that. what have we learned from those investigations? What have we learned from the hotline? What can we look at from a data analysis standpoint? And maybe you're even taking it a step further. Maybe you're looking at your adoption rates from your testing. Maybe you're looking at how many times your code of conduct is being, and please, for the love of God, I'm going to stand on my soapbox for a second. Please
hop on there.
Please get your code of conduct out of a PDF form or, God forbid, a physical form. Like, it really needs to be digital at this point. There is no excuse. It needs to be a smart code of conduct, ideally, where you could get some good analytics. Google Analytics are great if you could get them, because they're very helpful for this piece for your data analytics. And then finally, this is the one that almost no one has, and they are asking for it. If you read what they're actually putting, especially in this 2004 update, they want you to be proactive now. So now you're not just, that's your three-prong approach. So now you're moving from a pogo stick to your stilts to a stool that you could actually rest on, right?
Right.
And that's your strategy, your forward thinking, moving from a reactive to an analytical to a proactive approach. Because that's what the regulators are actually saying in this update. Now that you know that you have a problem, that's your first piece. Now that you're looking at your problem, what are you doing about the problem? What are you doing to address it going forward? What are you doing to now address the cultural problem that you've identified to make sure that it's not continuing to be a problem going forward? And that's where someone like me comes in. I'm a strategist. I'm a behavioral modification person. I'm a change management person. And so
that's exactly what a compliance person needs to be.
Yes.
They need to be a strategist, and they need to be a behavioral modification person. We should be the behavioral science experts in our organization. We should understand how human beings act in general, and we should understand how they act in specific in our organization, whether it's due to cultural, macro cultural norms, whether it's micro cultural norms in individual departments, whether it's, and the extent to which those norms are influenced by what's going on in our industry. That's our job to navigate, through that stuff. And like when we can move off the deck of the ship, tying up, wrapping up, ropes, and we can move up to that crow's nest, we can see a lot further and really help the ship kind of go in the right direction and avoid the storm and so forth. I just don't, I'm a little arrogant, I guess, but like, I don't understand what's so tough about this. Like, this to me seems like such common sense. Like when you're going through these three prongs, each time I'm asking in my own mind, okay, to what end? To what end? To what end? What's the point of this? Well, the point of it is that we want an agile kind of a program that's actually effective. And if your program is not agile and we're not, we're wrapping ropes up and we're not looking up at like how the weather patterns are changing, well, that's the opposite of what they're looking for. Why do you think people struggle so much with this? Is it just, they need it just, and the irony of all of this is almost that like what we want our stakeholders in the organization, like the way we want our stakeholders in the organization to act is almost at odds with how we end up actually acting with respect to the regulators. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think the answer is, I don't think it's that people don't want this. I think that a lot of people who are listening to this are like, of course I want this, but I'm underfunded. I'm overwhelmed. I could barely keep up with that first prong. How dare you ask for these other things? Of course I want these other things. And the answer is pause. Let's think about how most ethics and compliance departments are funded. Let's think about how they're structured. And this becomes a case of a lot of people running in circles because of how they're structured, right? So in America, what I've learned, most ethics and compliance departments are structured heavily lawyers. And They keep talking about how we're going to upskill lawyers to do these other two things. And at some point, we're magically going to make these other two things happen. Lawyers are very expensive. Or what they're going to do is they're going to take their investigators and they're going to upskill their auditors and their investigators, and they're going to reward people that they really like, that they've worked with for a long time, and they're going to promote from within. And they're going to reward these people because they like them and they're nice and they're good and they love them. And they're going to promote from within their organization to give them these roles. And frankly, I've seen this over and over and over and over again. And I've heard this at conferences and I've heard this in networking. And these are good people. These are wonderful people. And there are a lot of vendors that are catering to this. And this is so unhealthy.
How are vendors catering to it?
Well, like we have a lot of we just have a lot of support for this mindset, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are very frustrated, and a lot of it's designed to help people who are trying to upskill into frankly roles that they were never meant to do. Law school is not designed for behavioral management. It's not designed for change management. It's not designed for data analytics. People who are very, very good auditors, who are very, very good investigators, tend not to be change management or data analytics people. These are very specialized roles that exist in the world. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people like you who are former auditors or people like me who are former bankers that don't have these skill sets, but we're unicorns. Like, you're going to find us, we're out there, but we're rare. And if that's someone in your organization happens to have these skill sets in addition to having been that, you're lucky. Grab them and promote them, absolutely. But that's not what I'm seeing when I'm networking. What I'm seeing instead is they're taking someone who is a lawyer, who is a former auditor, who's a former investigator, that another lawyer, that another former auditor, that another former investigator really likes and they're comfortable with. And they're like, oh, we'll just upskill them, and ignoring the need of these two other prongs. And instead of hiring, you need a specialized person. And my professional assessment is you're much better off hiring from outside of your organization or hiring someone else within the organization who has this skill set and teaching them about ethics and compliance, and having that auditor, having that investigator, having that lawyer being their subject matter expert or SME, and teaching them E&C versus trying to upskill that person into a highly specialized role that's actually really critical for your organization.
Yeah, that like lawyer centric or that lawyer oversampling, I think is many times driven from like some old ways of thinking, or maybe what the industry used to be when it was so sort of small in scope. But now as we're moving away from compliance toward a culture of integrity, which is really kind of, you know, a higher sort of like ethics quotient within the organization, people knowing what's in bounds and out of bounds. It's not just interpreting some regulation and seeing how it, you know, how we might get in trouble. It's really about understanding the business and understanding the people in the business and how we might be able to better influence the behavior, how we might be able to increase the sort of propensity for compliant behavior. That's really what the game is. And again, if every business is a people business, well, then it's like, okay, I have to understand the business and I have to understand the people in the business. Of course, I have to know the regulations, but that's like table stakes. That's not like the game. To your point, that's perhaps that first prong, perhaps.
Yes. And I mean, if you get outside of the United States, very quickly you find that there are very few lawyers in ethics and compliance. This is really just, you see it in the United States, maybe a little in the UK, where it's very lawyer centric. It's very uncommon once you leave the United States to see lawyers very heavily embedded within the ethics and compliance. And what you find already happening within the United States, within business schools, they're already teaching ethics and compliance as its own standalone area. One of my members of ACE, the Austin Compliance and Ethics business networking group that I run here, I started and I run here. One of our members, Joseph Burke, he was the first chief compliance officer at Dell. He's now retired, but he also went on to be a professor at Fordham. He has a book coming out shortly, also being published by Corporate Compliance Insights, where he's a former lawyer. He is making a very strong argument in this book. It needs to be its own standalone area. A former lawyer himself is saying very clearly, it's being taught in universities already. It should be a check and balance, just like finance is, just like HR is. HR is heavily dictated by law, just like
exactly. Great point. That's a great analogy, or a great corollary to what we're talking about. But I think we have to get unstuck. And again, I think we have to look, the next 10 years is going to look just like the last 10 years if we just keep doing the same thing. And we keep thinking about this role and this function the same way. I find ethics and compliance to be I talk about this all the time, but like it drives so much enterprise value when it's unleashed and you have practitioners who know what they're doing and they are willing to exhibit the agency necessary to drive actual change. But if you're just keeping the lights on and you're just keeping the train on the tracks, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, there's this model in business school that you see, and everybody has seen it, of a kind of like the life cycle of a business. So a business sort of starts low, and then it goes through this growth phase where the slope of the line sort of increases. And then at some point it hits the maturity phase. And as a business reaches that maturity phase, the growth rate of that particular company ends up being ultimately like whatever the GDP growth rate is in a country, right? Like it just kind of normalizes down to that rate. And it's on us to make sure that like that flattening of the curve, that sort of maturity phase, that we push that off as far as possible. And we really run the risk of hitting that sort of flat line way too soon, when in actuality, we can keep that part of the curve that, you know, some of us should be on. I mean, look, there was a point where like ethics and compliance didn't exist, or it just kind of existed in sort of concept. Now it's a department. Now there are, you know, industry, you know, conferences and, you know, practitioners and consultants and all this stuff. So like it's a thing now. It's on us though to make sure that like that steep part of the growth curve persists as long as possible. What do you think is preventing us? And what kind of confidence, or like what would you say to like instill more confidence in somebody who's listening to this and they're like, man, I love it, but man, I just can't get unstuck. My wheels are spinning in my company. I'm hitting my head against the wall. And I got something else to say before you answer that. This is a sort of a little bit of a side pot tangent that I meant to say a minute ago, but this complaint of I don't have resources, I'm out of time, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's like, these are reasons why I can't do what I need to do, which ultimately feeds into like keeping that growth curve going up. I kind of don't buy it, because name one department in any organization that just is swimming in cash like Scrooge McDuck. Like who doesn't want more resources? Who doesn't want a bigger budget? Every single department wants to do more. Every single department is constantly making these bets with their time and their resources to achieve their goals. This is not something that's just like unique to ethics and compliance. And we're like, oh my gosh, you know, woe is me. I just don't buy it. Like, what do you think about that?
I think you're approaching it wrong.
Me?
Ooh, no, not you personally, but the people out there who are struggling with it. I think, first of all, you need a strategist like me. The way I approach it is very differently. And I'm going to say some stuff that's a little bit, maybe a little bit shocking to people. But my personal approach is, first of all, stop asking for so much.
Exactly.
First of all, if you have a Jacqui on your team, someone like me, the way I approach it is I go with less is more. Like, for instance, at one of my former employers, when I first got there, I was shocked to find out they had a 10-page newsletter that they were sending out from the E&C team, supposedly in the CCO's name. And my first question was, what are we doing? Where did this come from? Who's writing this? And it turned out they had hired an out-of-house legal team to write this. So they had outside counsel writing this. And I found out our own CCO wasn't even actually reading it. He was clicking on it and he wasn't even going past the first page. I found out,
like everybody else, by the way.
Correct. Literally no one. I got with marketing. I found out what our click-through rate was, and the answer was there wasn't. Literally no one was reading this. We were paying lawyers from outside to write a 10-page newsletter no one was reading.
Wild.
I found out what our why was. We had a certain threshold. There was a reason for it. I found out what the why was. I figured out how to create an alternative method. I made a partnership through other people. We got with marketing. We created a link. We truncated the message down to one paragraph with a fun link, with fun messaging, with images, with a separate vendor we already had a relationship with. We got rid of that vendor entirely. And all of a sudden, our click-through rate became, I think it was something like an 80% adoption rate. Now we met the why. We made a partnership with marketing. We blew all the metrics out and we were saving money. Instead, we also shifted to a LinkedIn messaging system, and all of a sudden we had interactions with our other executives. We started being able to get partnerships with those executives for our other messaging. We started stripping messaging from other places. We started getting our actual CEO, we got our GC, we got our chief financial officer to start embedding our messaging throughout within their own messaging.
See, I mean, that just takes kind of taking off your glasses, wiping off the lenses, and looking at whatever we're talking about with fresh eyes and bringing that sort of, that fresh perspective to like ask, well, why are we actually doing this? And is this achieving the ends? I mean, there's so many vestigial things like this. There's so many vestigial organs in compliance departments that are time sucks, that are money sucks, that aren't actually moving the needle. The needle being changing the behavior of the stakeholders in the organization. You can't do compliance by yourself. You just can't. Like you need the participation of all these human sensors in the organization to get the risk intelligence necessary to get that feedback loop, that flywheel going of continuous improvement to say, okay, well, where do we need to shift our focus? Where do I need to shift my limited resources? Which, like I said, by the way, every freaking department, everybody in the world has limited resources. Everybody only has 24 hours in the day. This is not something unique to us. How can I make better bets with those resources, time, money, people, whatever, to make a bigger impact? And again, it's going to go one of two ways, man. It's going to go either we're going to really elevate, we're going to turn into the circulatory system of the organization. We're going to drive more quality through our businesses by showing up as business people who are solving new problems, or we're just going to stay seated at the kiddie table and we're going to be, everybody's going to be talking about how tough their job is. Guess what? Life is hard for everybody. Nobody's on their deathbed saying, oh, that was easy. It's hard for everybody. So we need to just solve this next puzzle. That's it.
But it's about, I keep saying this, it's about relationships. And so if you notice, I didn't say I actually asked for less emails. I asked for less vendors. And I got so much more. Wouldn't you rather have your CEO talking about E&C stuff versus a 10-page newsletter from a vendor you don't need?
I mean, this whole, this sounds trite, but like ethics should be easy. It's not like, getting people to work out is hard. Okay. Because no one likes to work out. But like everybody wants to work in an ethical workplace. Everybody wants to trust their organization. So like we just have to kind of get that unlocked a little bit. And there's just so many ways to do it. But I think it does start, as you said, kind of with this mindset and this willingness to rethink what we're doing and really zoom out of it and say, like, is this, think about it this way. Every system is specifically and perfectly designed for the outcomes it's generating. So if you look at the outcomes of your program and they're not what you want them to be, then you got to look back at the system and see, how is this system designed? Because the outcome is a function of the system, Well,
and here's the other piece of it. I genuinely believe ethics is a profit leverage piece.
I agree.
And when it's done correctly,
I agree 100%.
If you're building those relationships, if you're able to show the right outcomes, if you're showing that you're saving money, not only that, now you're not a cost center. You could actually show you're a profit center because people want to work with companies that are seen as ethical. You want to be able to go to your board and, first of all, boards have to take your compliance training. Boards have to hear these messaging. There are actual requirements for these things. So if you're really smart, here's where it gets bonkers to me. So people have underinvested in the things that their boards have to touch, that their employees have to touch, that their executives have to touch. For some reason, this is the area that they ignore, and they hand this off to their lowest paid member of their team, and they ignore their policies, they ignore their codes of conduct, and they treat them like the redheaded stepchild when this is your value add. This is your delivery system. This is the thing that touches every single employee from the top to the bottom of your company. And that's what you're going to ignore?
Right.
This is your delivery system. If you are not investing in that, then that's why you're getting terrible returns, my friend.
Yeah, and also like investing doesn't necessarily mean more dollars. Investing means investing your time, investing your brain in how I can have more impact with this channel that exists. I mean, to your point, like this is a game of influence at the end of the day. I mean, I talk about that all the time. Like this is a sales job, okay? We're all in sales. And so we need to sell our program. We need to sell these axioms or these principles or this culture of integrity, because that's really where it starts. Jacqui, this has been so much fun. As we wrap up here, I can't believe that our time is already over. If you can go back in time, I love this question because it's free learning for me. But if you can go back in time and give young Jacqui a piece of advice that you wish you had sooner, what would that be?
The way your brain works is your greatest asset. I know you think it's quirky, but seeing systems, seeing the way that the world works, that is your greatest asset. Relationships are the greatest asset. So don't be afraid that that's where you shine. And listening is a superpower.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jacqui. I don't know. This was awesome. We're going to get a lot of clips from this one, and I hope to see you again soon. You guys got to check out that article on Corporate Compliance Insights. You should absolutely be on Corporate Compliance Insights Daily. There's such great content coming out of there, but definitely check out that article from Jacqui, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.